Why is a joke funny? Welcome to Philosopher's Corner. I'm John. Why is a joke funny? We've all heard a joke. Almost all of us have laughed at one. Why is a joke funny? What is it about a joke? Why? Why is it funny? Where do we begin with? We begin with what a joke is, right? A joke it's a communication, typically in the form of verbal language, typically an intellectual construct, and it sets up a premise, it sets up a concept, and the goal of a joke is to elicit laughter. So the joke itself, it's sort of in a difficult position because it's alerting the person to whom it is intended that it is attempting to elicit essentially an involuntary reaction. Because a laugh, in the vast majority of cases, like a genuine laugh is an involuntary reaction. It's a rush of emotions coming out of the person. It's an attempt to create a spontaneous emotion, a joke. And the emotions packed into a laugh are so many that we just call it a laugh. So that's the setup. So a joke it's an attempt to make someone laugh. And it's really classified as a joke once it's determined that it is a communication that does make someone laugh on a consistent basis. That's sort of the science of a joke, okay? It's like you have a communication, and with a high degree of correlation, it makes somebody laugh, right? So that's a joke. But why is it funny? Why is the joke funny? What is it in this communication? Because we have all these different forms of communication, right? All these different forms of communication don't elicit laughter. Laughter is a very specific emotion. It's a very specific target of communication. And not only that, it's a disarming emotion, and it's essentially a person's out of control of themselves for a moment. And a lot of people are on guard for it because we're going through life and it's not a thing that people are necessarily looking for. It's like laugh because most of your defenses come down, most of your primal stuff comes down. So it's actually like a really difficult state to achieve when you set out, especially since part of it is that you're making the person aware that that's the state you're trying to achieve, which can obviously affect the levels of participation or willingness to laugh, right? So what makes it funny? What makes a joke funny? Philosophically speaking, we can take it from a number of different avenues. I like to go the intellectual approach first. And you say you have a joke, you have a setup and a punchline, you have a premise or a concept or a conceit that the teller of the joke tells the person or people that primes their mind. It says, this is the situation, these are the factors, and in that moment, the joke has begun. And in that moment, the human mind, and we have a universal set of operating principles in our mind. Our minds work mainly the same. They have the same components. They have the same areas of the brain that process things, that relay them to the emotional field. And we have similar psychological setups and mechanisms. So the joke taps into those immediately and says, okay, I'm going to set the mind in motion. I'm going to set your brain and your mind in motion with the setup and with the factors. And the brain, being anticipatory in nature or attempting to project outcomes, which that comes out of the survival evolution lessons that the brain has learned, now is trying to anticipate the outcome of the situation and of the factors, most of the time in relation to, even though the person's aware of the joke, but most of the time the brain's trying to do anticipation of normal survival factors, of like normal things are going along as planned, obey the laws of physics, obey normal behavioral paradigms, normal ethics, all these things, right? There's like this sort of flow, and the mind starts to anticipate the outcome of this story that we call a joke, or of this setup that we call a joke. And that's where comedic anticipation and tension begins. So the brain's doing that. So the brain's firing, it's thinking, it's like, okay, cool. Brain always wants, for safety reasons and for primal evolutionary reasons, the brain always wants to be one step ahead of like what might get the drop on us. So the joke sets that in motion. It sets that part of the brain in motion, and so the brain's leaping to conclusions. Like, and we, even if we're not consciously aware of them, right? So the joke progresses, the tension builds, and then you get to the punchline, and the punchline can do one of two things. It can either exactly hit where the mind has anticipated it to, and then take it somewhere else, and that's revelatory. But more often than not, it gives you something that's completely at odds with the anticipated resolution of the joke. So the mind has come to one of like whatever the subset of normal anticipated outcomes should be for regular thinking and regular behavior for that set of circumstances. And then the joke, playing against that set, the punchline playing against that set of anticipated outcomes, says something completely different. And the gap between that is what makes it funny. Because if the person says something that's completely at odds with what the anticipated outcome was, that's hilarious. That makes us laugh because that's something we didn't think of. It's something we didn't feel about. It's something out of the normal thought process. And in that moment, why is that funny? Well, it's funny because new synapses, new neural networks are being formed in the brain. So in that moment, we're having a moment of explosive brain growth. We're having a new neural network be set into our brain, which then floods the body with new emotions, new thoughts, new possibilities, all these new things. It taps into all the preconceived notions of things that like we were anticipating. It brings into question all of our life experiences on the cellular level. Everything all at once floods in with this new neural network being hit, and this new emotion, and this new perspective hitting. And then in order to sort of, but in a joyful way, and in order to express this deluge of emotions and thoughts and perspectives coming in, we laugh. For lack of articulation, because there would be too many emotions. It's too powerful an emotion, too powerful of a spurt of growth, and it feels too good to try to bother to articulate what all the things that are coming through us. We just laugh like a fountain of emotion. It's an ecstatic, joyous fountain of emotion that includes so many different emotions coming out of us, right? Now, to go deeper into it, if that joke is hitting very specific areas of the individual's experience, the person hearing the joke, if it's hitting very specific areas of the person, right? Because we have areas of our life that are conscious, that we're aware of, we have a pretty good handle on, and we can be pretty stoic or cool or manage that. I'm like, okay, that's in our operating procedure. But then we have things that are in the unconscious, things that we're unaware of for various reasons. It's, things that just, you don't have time to think about everything, and there's always a time to learn something new. So if a joke, on top of like playing with the tension of anticipation of what we thought the outcome was going to be, and then giving us a different one, or one that's skewed that makes us laugh and gives us a new perspective, all these other things. We also have, if the joke is bringing something from the unconscious into the conscious, which is hilarious because then the laughing is fueled just by like new energy coming in. Oh my God, that was in the unconscious. Now it's in the conscious. And now you feel this rush of energy of all the different things that it takes to process that type of energy, the intellectual, the emotional, the whole shebang. All right. So on top of the anticipation, there's the bringing of the unconscious into the conscious, which is hilarious. And then there's all the personal attributes of bringing the unconscious into the conscious, which is where healing happens. Alchemists and philosophers and transcendentalists and people who go internal will tell you that the true healing comes when you go in and you bring the unconscious into the conscious and you integrate. And a joke, especially a great joke, like you can have a normal joke, but a great joke is something that really optimizes the amount of unconscious yet important. Like if you could like look into the unconscious and say, oh, there's like a top 10 list of most important things for this particular person or this audience. They have a top 10 list of things that are in the unconscious that if they integrate it in their conscious state would superpower them or heal them or make them feel great or really bring them into a more whole person perspective. If the joke can hit any one of those major unconscious items and bring them into conscious integration in that moment, stacked on top of the other things, not to mention the fact that jokes get around defense mechanisms for things that are conscious. So also things that are behind defense walls but are conscious sometimes are even more explosive than things that are unconscious. So when you can get around defense mechanisms and bring things from the conscious defense areas into it, along with unconscious items that are important to the person that are just in the unconscious into that moment, and you start to bring all these deep, big, huge personal issues, very personal because they're in the person, but they're being presented in a way that is accessing the personal individual moments through universal language for the most part. You get an explosive revelatory moment that feels good because in that moment the brain goes, thank God, like all these things that the person's oversoul or soul has been really kind of wanting the person to integrate. Now, through vis-a-vis a comedian or joke teller, there's a communication that is giving the person permission and getting around non-permissible areas to integrate self, and to integrate self in a way that is joyous and open. And if you're in an audience around other people where it's joyous and open and the lower negative emotions are not in play for that moment of self-integration of these things that maybe for whatever reason, like outside of the person's scope of experience or their own ability to integrate it on their own for various reasons. So the joke acts as the catalyst, the communication mechanism for the integration of all these issues. Conscious, unconscious, things behind defense walls, even things consciously that you just want to grow more, right? Not everything has to be unconscious. There are plenty of things you'd be like, tell people a joke about a well-known thing that everybody's comfortable with, but you get deeper into it and you bring them to like a deeper state of understanding or a deeper state of appreciation or a deeper state of empathy, whatever it is, wherever the direction of the communication takes the person. So when the person's alone, they can laugh and have a good laugh about whatever it is. And in a group, then it compounds because you have an individual having an individual experience, and then the group consciousness comes together because many of the issues and lessons and factors in play are social in nature and are best resolved in a group. So in that moment, we are truly liberated. In the moment of laughter, a joke can liberate us. It can liberate us from all the shackles of internal work that have kept us from integrating, from self-integration. And there's, in my experience, in the human existence, in the human experience, there's no more powerful moment than conscious self-integration, conscious integration of self to make oneself whole, to make oneself holy, is to integrate oneself completely. And jokes are funny because they give us a chance in a moment, in a sort of unexpected way, to integrate self in the deepest form possible. And it feels great. So why are jokes funny? Because they allow us to joyously grow in an unexpected moment of revelatory pleasure. Well, I hope you enjoyed this time at Philosopher's Corner, and I hope you enjoy your jokes even more moving forward. Have a good day.